Is on.
Once
Thank you so
again.
much, Douglas, for keeping me on track. But here we are. We are recording and you can get going. Sorry. Sorry.
No worries, no worries. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Once again, glory to the Most High, and thank you all everyone for coming. Some of you, I'm sure, are having dinner, so good thing. Keep your screens away from us so we don't see you indulging in some delicious dinner. But thank you as well to Red Wheelbarrow for hosting me. Thank you, Maneo. It really means a lot to be hosted by Maneo because I always tell them that for me, one of the best in that we have, a real treasure. And yeah, I'm so happy that we have the third collection, the third full length, the fifth overall book. And I don't want to do too much talking because I tend to get carried away when you're talking about craft. Um, but I have some themes that I want to sort of run through, and I'm very mindful of the time as well. So we'll be in and out like the challenge. Um, but yeah, so the first sort of theme I wanted to discuss is culture. Um, I think with regards to the approach that we took for this collection, it was a late decision to have a bilingual collection, one written in isiZulu and English. No doubt it was difficult to write in isiZulu for various reasons. One of them being that I write predominantly in English, but it was a good challenge to have for this collection. And so the first poem is the opening poem that I'll read today. As a special treat, I'll also be reading the previous original version of Umgeni that was in English, not necessarily a translation, but very close to what ended up being appearing as the opening poem. So the first poem is Umgeni, but before I read that, I also want to read the little intro that I like to have at the beginning of each book. Um, I say, kubo laba basibonayo isidingo sokubhekana ngqo esimnyama sabo, which means to those who see the need to look or confront their sort of black energy or dark auras. Isimnyama is a very difficult thing to translate, but we could say a dark aura, black aura. And so I feel like the collection is about the confrontation of the negatives. For me, in this instance, it would be fear. So Umgen is the opening poem. That's what I'm reading now. Okay. Sondelani sizwe sabansundu. Lo mfula usuka kude. Kudala uhamba usuyafika. Abadala bazilethe izixwayiso. Kudala ubesho bethi dingane zakwethu qaphelani. Ningalinge nivume imiphimbo yeni yome nithule. Ikakhulukazi manibona umnyakazo emanzini. Ningalinge nilinde nivele nishone khona. Kungabi namazwi asalela emphinjeni. Ula osedala ngasolwandle. Siyakuncenga. Sicela usicacisele. Sifuna ukuza ngawe. Sibuza kuwe. Sithi wena uthule uthini. Amaputukezi edlula egudla ngakuwena. Umlomo kaDigama waphuza kuwe mngeni. Izisebenzi zakhe seziqondane ngqo nokoma. Umuso wakho mngeni wabasindisa. Isizwe sabansundu sona sasala nokoma. Okay, that was Umgeni. So basically, it sort of contextualizes the whole Portuguese sort of moving through Durban. And there's a huge statue in town of Vasco da Gama, and I just thought I wanted to contest that, the presence of that statue. And so I want to read the original version, which is not necessarily a translation, but it does a good job in explaining the context of the poem. It appears in the Poetry Island Review. Um, and it also gives an explanation of the name Umgeni as well. So Umgeni. Someone decided that this river should be named Entrance. Though in theory, wouldn't the question be, what are we getting ourselves into? When the natural flow of water only moves forward, deep inside the wonder of how far the water has traveled to reach the coast. And could holding back be considered a sign of weakness when there exist careless rivers able to glide gently down towards the swallows, the mouth? And now to cease to say the word river. And while the water moves to a different place, and how could we not notice the change happening in silence? And while we were lost in a deep contemplation of our lives, the weight of needing to be perceived, in the blind spot that has led us not witnessing the foreshadowing, our sense of entitlement to moisture resting on the throat. And most things are recklessly said before the coming of a drought, while entering the heart of the ocean. From the chest, there is a distinctive feeling that comes once you reach the place where you are going. Okay. That was the original version of Umgeni, but we decided to leave that out in favor of the Zulu version. Just to continue that whole sort of culture thing that I introduced earlier, I wanted to read the poem Ngome, which begins the second portion of OLE. And with this poem, I'm contesting the name Blood River, of which is named after the war between the Zulus and the Voortrekkers in 1838. Of course, their reconciliation before was of Boxing Day, their reconciliation was called Voortrekker Day. And so we have this river now that's being called Blood River. And the question now is, whose blood has this river been named after? So the poem Ngome. Ngezikhathi zakudala, amabhunu esaqala ukulwa nabansundu, kubangwa umhlaba. Kuyo le mpi bayiqamba ngokuthi impo yomfula wegazi. Okwakuliwa maqondana nomfula. Lona abadala uma bewubiza bethi Ngome, ubusabela. Igazi latheleka, umfula washintsha, umbala waba bomvu. Lavaleka igama lomfula. Emuka nayo umphefumulo yamabutho. Silondovaleka. Emva kwayo yonke leminyaka, lutho ukuphola. Mfula waseNgome, kuzoze kube nini? Bekubuza ngalo okungesilona. Ukuqanjwa kwakho ngegazi lethu kuyasithunuka namanje. Okay, that was the second poem. The last poem in isiZulu that I'll read for this portion is called Langa, and it is a found poem from that famous video of Usman Sembeni, the film director, talking about the sun and how he is facing or how his work is perceived in Europe, and he talks about how he himself is the sun. And so I took that and I put that in this poem. You could call it a found poem, to be honest. But yeah, Langa. U-Usman wakasembeni wabuza wathi, kungani ngibe umajikanelanga ngihlale ngokubheka ilanga mina ngokwami ngiyilo ilanga. Okay. And so that takes us to our first English poem. And this is a poem that appears in Wasafiri 121. There's a clip going around. I think it has this poem in it. The poem is called Reparations, and in italics under it, or our word for soil, land, earth, and world is one and the same. So in Zulu, the word for soil, land, earth, and world is one and the same. Umhlaba, that's the word. So yeah, so the poem has different sections, soil, land, earth, and world, but I'm not going to read the name, but I'm just going to go through it as one piece because it connects with one another. But yeah, this is reparations. Umkhulu was buried without his home returned to him. Ropes carefully slid his casket down, dressed in a woolen brown suit, arms crossed over his chest, coming together from where all the hurt emanated. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can hear him screaming, "Where is the land?" Pleading for reparations owed by uHlanga Kanyilanga. Often, I have this dream of Umkhulu blowing on his saxophone. And for a moment, I'm unable to feel him until I am drowning in a river flowing from his eyes. And in an opening, I find her spirit. Umamkhulu speaks to me about the sharpness of the earth. Lo mhlaba uyahlaba, or this world is sharp. If only I had listened. Perhaps my skin would be as tough as her resolve. How long will I be weary of the ones who sharpen our earth? In our culture, when you say umhlaba, you are speaking of the piercing edge through our palms and all that was taken from us. Black hand civilizing tar, wooden floors creaking underfoot, sounds of the unnatural. Umkhulu long dead, unable to rest, because the Zulu word for soil, land, earth are one and the same. The depth of a hole are as deep as the loss of our ancestors. Our paths converge down below, and for us, Amazulu, the whole ordeal has been like losing our world. Okay. That was reparations. And so the last portion of the culture theme is docu-fiction. And it's named after the Afro-pop duo docu-fiction. It's a lyric poem, and I've taken a few liberties with Istalezelo, the word Istalezelo. I've written it in the shorthand, but you'll see why I did that with the way it's read. So yeah, it's a lyric poem, docu-fiction. Choking or a forearm raised, shielding a mouth amid the flames. Ngamla should have known change would come, blowing with the wind. Must have thought it fiction in disbelief, wondering how a continent so dark could have made the discovery on their own. Our eliminated homes in the wilderness, oral traditions of our myths, as told by our foremothers. Before uHlanga, before they came, all silent songs of Okok, who's to blame for your fading? It's against there to turn whispers, the weight of wilted flowers, of leaves left fallen, in vast fields of wanting. Lungs breathe in heat, humidity. Inside the neck, a dry spot spreads, thirst, unmerciful sun, a felt fire running down the bridge, moving towards the chorus. A smoke that reddened the chest, that made the lungs feel like burning. All right. That is the end of our first section. I hope everybody is still with us, having a great time. A nice little break for us to just digest all of that. Two more sections to go. I feel like a bit of a school teacher right now, but yeah, two more sections to go. Theme number 2, origins. And one thing I wanted to do for this collection was to speak about the Ntuli clan. Ntuli coming from meaning dust. And the story goes that according to Isithakazelo, which is the praise song, that our descendants were running away from cannibals, to the point that dust scattered everywhere as they were running. And so that's where you get Ntuli. If you watch Ilembe, they tell you all about it, but I just don't like the way they depict us in that Shaga Ilembe. I'm sorry. But so I have a few poems that I've got here, 4 poems that speak to that theme. And the way I spread out the collection, I have the initial introduction of that in the first section with the poem Tuli, which introduces the Isithakazelo from a more general perspective. If you have the collection with you, that's on page 15. So yeah, Ntuli, that's Tuli. Tuli. Umlando wakithi waqala ngoThuli. Uze uzubize kambe yini le eyenza imilenze yabo ibambe ijubane. Amehlo abomvu, songo lokufa, khala inhliziyo, jika zinyoni uyafisa. Ukwesaba kusindisa umzimba. Amehlo alibonile ilanga lishona. Asebonile ukuthi kule nto ababhekana nayo bekungenzeka bengasindi. Okay. So this then transitions into a more personalized duel with Isithakazelo, and I take this into the poem Together, which is where the Ntuli clan starts. That whole running that was happening away from the cannibals was on the riverbanks of the Tugela River, according to the clan of the praise song, or Isithakazelo. And so I wanted to speak to my brother, of which most of this collection is speaking to him, about how we interact with Isithakazelo Sakantuli. Okay. Together. Bafo. Kambe abakithi bazizwa benjani? Bebalekela amazinzuku. Kuwo lo mlando wethu bayasho bathi sabonakala ngefu lezintuli. Lapho saqanja ngokwenzakala kubalekwa. Isiqalo sethu lesi. Kwele lami ngike ngiphuphe konke okubi okwenzeke kimi, lokhu okwangisondeza nokufa, lokhu okwadala abakithi bebaleke, ngike ngizibuze, yini eyadala ukwesaba? Kambe ilona lodwa ifa abasishiyela lona. Okay. And so the continuation of this Tagazulu or the praise song is that once they were running away from the cannibals, they found refuge at the mountains of Lenge, more like the caves of Lenge. And so the next poem speaks to that time in the caves, having evaded the cannibals. It's on page 55 if you're following. Lenge. After our kin evaded the relentless hunger of Amazimzum Abadlabantu, the cannibals unable to devour their flesh, Abaron Ntuli ran towards the mountainous terrain of Lenge, and there they would stay for a period. Inside dark caves, hidden amid night terrors, the rumble of hunger pangs. And so, brother, the question is one of lines. Because how could we know what it means to truly starve? And so, the final portion of this origin story that I've sort of scattered all around the book is Isibongo. And I've been sort of thinking about Isitagazolo and how there is an insinuation that the Ntulis were the ones who were in fact the cannibals from their time within the caves of Lenge because of the hunger that would have taken place there. And so it made me think about not just the literal cannibalism, but also the figurative cannibalism of human nature. And yeah, sometimes, you know, we want too much of other folks and it starts to border on a sort of cannibalism. And so I wanted to write this poem to think about how I was to engage or delve even deeper into this idea of my clan having been cannibals, the implication. The poem is called Isibongo. Umlando wasendlini outlines the origins of our family name. Brother, I struggle to move past this one part that haunts me. My mind unable to get over the one part bothering me. The mystery of what our ancestors were running from. Upon for the tracing of what they were running from. Through broad depths of Zulu, so capable of hiding things. This Tagazelo conceals things. The myth of what took place inside the dark caves of Lenge. Is there any truth to what they said happened at Lenge? Were our ancestors the one running from the cannibals? Were our ancestors the ones who became the cannibals? I have nightmares of the size of their mouths lined with blood. My mouth left open, questioning the origins of my blood, while Umlando wasendlini outlines the origins of our family name. Okay. That is the second theme done. Just one more to go, and if we have a little bit more time, we'll see how many more we can add into this. Yes, a nice thumbs up from the great host there. Yes, thank you so much. And So the third theme I want to talk to is generations. Not like the soapy that was on, well, still on. But yeah, bad joke. Generations. I just was also thinking about how my responsibilities as a poet are also changing. Um, I think right now, I'm sort of finding myself in positions where I am needing to be a facilitator, teacher, and before I was somebody who was sort of fighting for a place, a seat at the table, if you may. And I don't think it's always, I don't feel like it's always been established, but I feel like my footing is a little bit more stable and it's up to me to sort of keep it that way. But I just also was thinking about it in a more broader term in terms of like the relationship between the youth and the older generation and how much we can learn from each other and how we can cooperate. Um, and so the first poem speaks to that with Chala, which is inspired by the recent, would you say recent, something that happened in 2021, 2020, the death of the Zulu king. Um, I watched on ENCA, Diann Ntuli was talking about um, his body would not be buried, but it would be planted. Chala, and that was very powerful for me. And so I like the idea of the body being planted rather than buried because there is the potential of so much more, almost like it's a new beginning rather than an end, a final end. And so the title of this poem is Chala, and it also is in Zulu, speaking to the generations. Sibonga zona izandla ezasithambela. Zinolwazi ukuthi ukuvuthwa nobudala akusiyona into eyodwa. Sibonga bona ababa nolwazi ukuthi izimbali ziphathwa kanjani. Ngoba iningi lethu siyizimbewu ezaphazamiseka. So I didn't want to translate the poems too much, but I think this one will bear with us. We will. And I do want to sort of speak to the idea that the older generations has that, just because you're old doesn't necessarily mean you have wisdom. I think wisdom is something that you earn. It's not so much a given that if I'm 50 years old, I'm the most wise person. I think you sort of your experiences because it's the way that you deal with the world. So I just wanted to address that as the entry point into this conversation around generations. And then the next poem I want to speak to is sort of speaking to my own generation. Living in KwaMashu, I live around a community that is, I'd say it's a wounded community, and a self-medicating community. And some have developed drinking habits. And for better or for worse, we have to exist around that space. And so I wanted to write a poem that is mindful of that, and really addresses the fact that our generations are changing and that we are moving, almost graduating into the next tier, and how there's a responsibility for my generation to be responsible. So it is a bit of a chastising tone, but yeah, it's one of those things. So the poem is called Our Neighborhood Tends to Grief Through an Everlasting Feast of Libations. Mashu, your grief so heavy, the Lord of motion stops moving the wheels of an SAB truck, dead, as if to force it to observe your pain. And please, don't you make the mistake of deeming this a failure of an engine. Instead, let it be known, Abapansi deemed it fit for the breakdown of this delivery truck. For it was fate that decided this would happen right here, to match a freshness of red wounds in textures of our gathered sorrow. Heavy is the vessel, leaving behind thickened scars on tar, anointing black lines on roads, curved as a cursive, divine sign left behind, holy as a halting, suddenly, in the middle of the openness, all the more vulnerable as the crowd trickles in and gathers on the scent of blood. Tongues coil seductively around the wound and lick in search of comfort, consoling slow hum of the engine, a harmonized montage deep in the heart of summer. Crate-sized burdens released onto the shoulders of amapikinini, nabotakalani who held tough. Amajita namo mama, taking the load off the wheels of the unmoving. All desires fed, soul of the engine freed, drifting to a soft death. Our neighborhood tends to grief through an everlasting feast of libations. For Abadala are all dead now. The households are run by crooked children, the spines reluctant to align, unwilling to uphold lineage, heavy gravitas of last names. The only thing our throats tend to do is swallow. KwaMashu with the great flooding, our comrades in too deep, so all we ever see is drowning. Okay. And so the last poem from that generation theme is a Zulu poem called Lunga. And I wanted to leave a sense of hope as well. It's always good to hope. I think what's helped me over the years is to be optimistic and to live with hope and always sort of strive towards the fact that, you know, things eventually get better. And so yeah, it's right towards the end poem, Lunga. It's very short as well. Lunga. Zaqala ziwutshani, zaphenduka ameva, zagwaza amafu, zawusa kwemvula. Zasho zathi nalokhu bekumele kwenzeke. Zaphela izinhlungu, sabona sekulunga. All right. And then that was the third theme. Oh, sorry, I have one more in the generation theme. I'm sorry, one last one. The last poem from this theme is called You Are the Elders Now. And it sort of sums up greatly what I was talking about, like almost like the generations are graduating to the next level and how much responsibility I feel now, being a 30-something-year-old now. So you are the elders now. Our family is changing. Who hold what our ancestors once held firm? The story they told about the sanctity of lines, our lineage. Who's left now to carry this for them? Consider this. We give thought to superstitions and then they come alive. The sun as kin to fire. Birth begins first with bones tender to hard to tender once again. And is it the fear of all this that leads us to move away? Again, consider. Ngaphansi kwethu, a black heaven. Bare souls connecting us like roots. Hard to break the tar. Rigid roads underfoot. Yet even through all this, their whispers still come to us, saying, you are the elders now. Thank you. And that is the third theme, generations. And so I just want to check, how much time do we have? I'm sorry. I think that might be towards the end. Two more?
Hi. I think I think we're good with time, but I think we're gonna wrap up in a little bit. How are you feeling? How are you doing?
All right.
How are you doing
I'll
for
just read
time
two
and for
more,
speed
two
and
more.
steam?
I'll just read two more and then we'll be good. I'll be happy with that. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
cool. And then we'll open up into question and answers if that's cool.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Amazing.
So I think, yeah, I did time it well. I just went a little bit over time, but yeah. So I just want to read two more. The next poem I want to read is called Mfecane, which is written after our hosts, one of our host poems. A nice special little gift there. A nice special little gift. After the poem Mfecane. And so I like the way that our poems are in conversation here. This one is written to my brother. Yeah, Fixan. The first act begins while competing for the love of a single mother. On the subject of twins, African myth has always been divided. How come hands pick flowers to sever from soil? Sacrifice is a gift, and the curse is loving your brother, hoping for the return of a virgin you remember. Amid the unbearable heat of a moment, the second act begins with the words I form against you and thrust that turn against me and conquer. And when I ask you about water, the thickness of our blood, your spear is a rebuttal that never leaves your throat. Okay. And the last poem is a very important poem in the context of the times, one for Palestine. It's called A Zion Upside with Eyes. And there's a small quote by Mandela where he says, we know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians. Again, the poem is called A Zion Upside with Eyes. Okay. Azania, how do you so easily turn your face away? Blinded, silence piercing your ears, collective roof of mouths caved in. Really? Nothing more to say? Even through a sea of red dot recordings, remnants remind us of our own content. eyes have seen it all before amid the struggle for our freedom. The sunlight carried radiance across the tribal skies of Gaza, beyond the mushroom clouds, beyond plague of power blocking humanity. Even before the siege, there existed a threat of being impaled by the sharp edges of tyranny. And when they use the word justice, how does it taste? Is it as sweet as a forehead kissed amid the bitterness of war, while the children fear living perpetually as statues? And how come the safe zones seem to move when the people move? Is this how the magnets of the Nagba keep pulling? Azania, do your eyes see beyond the dark depths of a hole? Can you still hear echoes of Mandela as he spoke of Palestinian freedom as being adjacent to our own? And in the quest for fulfillment, how do we carry on without thinking of a river whose waters merge with tears, if only to will it closer to the sea? Azania, how do you keep your head down? You so easily turn your face away. Have you forgotten the meaning of Ubuntu? Are you so undone at the hands of a strange love, a violent love for the bomb? Where would we be if the world also chose to look away, to go contrary to our xenophobia? Don't our differences make us all the same? Pain of all the years, of overcast clouds covering, gray wound of heaven. Zulu Vulega, wash away the hurt, wash away this pain. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sihle. That was an incredible journey. And as someone who's been reading you for a really long time, it's been so wonderful to feel the texture of your voice and your concerns change. And this new collection is incredible. And I feel very lucky, yeah, just to witness you work. And yeah, I'd love to open up the space to anybody who'd like to ask a question. You can raise a hand or you can just pop in if you feel brave, and unmute yourself, introduce yourself and ask a question. If no one has a question, I'm happy to be the sacrificial lamb. One question that I do have for you, it feels like this collection is trying to find and map out sensations of grief and loss. It's loss of time, loss of language while working inside of language, loss of a particular sort of sense of childhood, your relationship with your brother. There's so much moving through, and I wanted to ask about how you approach and texturize grief. It just feels very like it's something that I can touch in the collection. I'd love to hear your thoughts on loss and grief and the way that they function.
Yeah, it definitely is that. I think one of the things I found that helped the most is to be aware of the grief, to confront the grief, and to understand that it changes over time as well. And I think we learn the most from when we are honest with ourselves in the way that the grief sits and how it tends to help us also to evolve. In my personal view, that's how I see it. And I think for me, just the writing of the poems was a process that also helped to sort of remap and reimage the way and reposition myself um, away from the negative and towards a more optimistic view of it as being part of the journey. And yeah, I've sort of learned that, to hold on to hope is a great thing. And the idea of loss and grief, I do speak about the loss of Umamkulu, grandmother's language. But in a way, I have due responsibilities as well. And I feel like um, we can always learn from these wounds and sometimes wear them proudly as well. Yeah. So yeah, that's how I sort of dealt with it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Sihle. One of my favorite writers and abolitionist writer, Mariam Kaba, says that hope is a discipline.
Mm,
And
mm,
that feels particularly grounding at the moment. We have a
yeah.
raised hand. We have two raised hands, Sakina and then Pralini. So in that order.
Hello, Salbona. Um, this was really amazing. I'm so glad that I knew about it. Sihle, thank you so much for sharing your new poems. And the whole time I'm in California. The whole time I was sitting here going, oh man. So thank you so much for that. It's morning time here, so it was a good way to start my day. Um,
So much.
maybe it's a simple question, but I was just wondering, how did you decide or how did you choose which poems to um, publish in isiZulu versus which ones in English? And is there a connection into the themes of how each were presented either in either language?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have to sort of put into perspective that I've been writing the same collection since about 2020, and the English poems had a lot longer to like develop themselves. Um, I had a whole set of river poems written in English, and then none of those made the final 50. It was 50 poems. And yeah, just a discussion that we had with Nick about the censoring of Isintu. And now that I think about it, it would seem a little bit disingenuous that these rivers named in isiZulu, Umgeni, Tsugela, Msunduzi, are going to be spoken about in English. Um, I think one of the telltale signs for me was the poem that I did read, Umgeni. Uh, I had to translate it in the English version to say that it means entrance. So I think just to remain true to the rivers themselves, I think it was a good decision to keep the poems in isiZulu. And I think for me, it was a new challenge to write poems in isiZulu because I think a lot of the collections we have in South Africa are mainly in English. I think only just Sipagadi Jonas's collection is also bilingual. And I would like to see more to those who would want to take on that challenge. But also, I want to say that no one should be pressured into how they'll write as well. I think you do what you feel comfortable doing, and we shouldn't let um, external forces dictate, but we should want to do what we feel is right. And I felt like writing in this was the right time for that. Um, yeah.
Thank you so much. And um, you're blessing people all over the world, and you're also encouraging me to pick up my isiZulu lessons again. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sakina. And our next question is from Pralini. Go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I was just looking for my mute button. Sihle, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm gonna just put my video on for a little bit.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay. I'm struggling to hear a little bit.
yeah,
Oh, there we
it's
go.
odd to talk to
Okay.
a blank screen. I just wanted to say thank you so much because, you know, KZN is my motherland, actually. And
Mm,
it felt like, yeah, I don't even know how to explain, but that feeling of home, just listening to your poem. And yeah, and just letting the isiZulu wash over me, you know, like a river, actually.
mm,
But
mm,
the question I had was also to do with language, actually, because, and I think you might have answered it, but I'm not sure if you write all your poems in English and isiZulu, or
okay.
whether some just ask to be written in isiZulu and some ask to be written in English. And if you
Mm,
do write a poem in both languages, when you're writing it, are you thinking in the language that you're writing it in?
oh.
Um,
Mm,
so, because I'm remembering an interview that Baba Mazizi Kunene gave, and he was talking about how he wrote Emperor Shaka the Great, and that he wrote it when he was writing it in isiZulu. He was thinking in isiZulu. He was writing it in that. It wasn't a translation. So the English wasn't a translation. He was actually writing the
mm,
English in English,
mm,
thinking in English, and writing
mm,
you know, the
mm,
I think he had written the isiZulu version first.
mm,
Anyway,
mm.
so that's my question to you.
Thank you so much for that one. Admittedly, I'd say most of my poems are predominantly in English, but I've always thought of myself as a bilingual poet. I always throw around a phrase in isiZulu here and there, sometimes even in the Tsotsitaal as well. Um, but one thing I've noticed is that, when I speak isiZulu, I do sound like a completely different person sometimes than when I speak in English. But um, yeah, like it's been a conversation I've been having a lot with like people around me, like the question of do you dream in isiZulu as well? Some people sort of we have the conversation of when you're angry, what's the first language? What's the default language when you stub your toe or someone is upset you? Um, and for me, it's changed. It changes, like it depends on the threshold of the anger. But I definitely am somebody who's thinking in English. But if the poem comes to me in Zulu, like the river poem, for instance, I kind of had to sort of think of myself in that context of the Zulu poem. So it's contextual, but admittedly, because of my upbringing, I'd say the default is English, unfortunately. But it is something that I'm kind of learning to live with in the sense that um, it can be both, and I should work towards it being both, and I shouldn't be ashamed if it goes either way. Because certain people position us into feeling shame that we are thinking or dreaming in English, and it's all up to us at the end of the day. So um, yeah, that's the answer I can give for now. Thank you so much.
Go ahead, Ed.
Hey, thanks, Maneo. Thanks, Sihle. I
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I wanted to chime in with Maneo with your idea that the collection can be read as a mapping out of grief, and in various ways, language, time, the things that Maneo drew attention to. But I thought a nice extension of that, or um, yeah, without becoming too analytical, you address the problem of naming, historical naming, right in the beginning. You interrogate that, and so by extension, to get to the point, the collection could also be read then as a reclamation, a re-envisaging of time and experience. And I guess the conversation with your brother is a part of that. Yeah, so which I suppose links to what you said about more hopeful interpretation of the past and vision of the future, I guess. So I'm going around in circles here, but I think you're getting what I'm riffing off Maneo's riff, and yeah, yeah. Just wondered if you had anything to say in response to the idea of reclamation, or yeah, re-envisaging.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for that, Ed. Always good to see a familiar face as well. So good to see you again. So I did want to sort of have a collection that moves away from the urban as well. I think Zabalaza Republic is probably one of the more urban collections based in the city, or not like the township. And so the landscaping, like the rivers and the caves and all of that thematically is where I wanted to go with this one. And so with regards to just reclaiming, I did also want to reimagine an evolved sense of being Zulu, in the sense that the older generation tends to be very prescriptive and dictate a certain way to be Zulu. And now that I am the older generation, I feel like it's also my duty to say, you can be Zulu in your own definition, in your own way, and still retain that foundation of being rooted in the culture. And yeah, sometimes, people will want to dictate how you live. I'm not the Zulu that will be first in line to go and slaughter a goat, but that doesn't make me any less Zulu to the ones who are still living in rural Melmoth. And so the reclaiming happens on both sides for me. The reclaiming of isiZulu in ways that work for me. The reclaiming of language, of the poetry genre as well in ways that work for me. And one thing I'm learning with the responsibility of where I am now as a poet is that I'll sort of cook this food for you and you can eat it with me, and we can taste sort of something very nice, very delicious, something for the soul. And it's just my position, my perspective, and I hope that those who read it will respect that. So yeah, it's just that's my idea of the reclaiming. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, useful.
Thank you so much.
Go ahead, Sakina.
See, thank you. So I'm really fascinated by just like how we look at translation. After I read R.F. Kuang's Babel, it just like kind of lit a fire in me about language and all this. I won't pontificate on that, but I was just wondering also, do you come upon different insights as you process these themes in English versus in isiZulu? Like, are there different ways that you understand or different insights that come from kind of chewing on these themes in English versus in isiZulu?
Yeah, that's a great question. Admittedly, like I said, I had more time to write in the English, and we wrote the Zulu very late on. I think I probably had about a year with the Zulu, but I feel like I made it work in the sense that Zulu as a language, I understand it to be more poetic, a little bit more open-ended, whereas English uh, can force you to be more precise in the way that you use it. So if you'll notice, once you grab the book, the Zulu poems are sometimes very short, but I wrote them to be very sharp as well. And in that way, um, I feel like they add so much value to the overall body of work. And that's kind of how I sort of wanted to use the isiZulu, and sort of the topic that we dealt with the Zulu is more around mythology and the landscapes, rivers, Zulu mythology. And so I'll work to my strengths. I'll work to the strength of the language as far as I understand it. And the English poems serve their purpose as well. So there's some poems I could not have been able to write in English. Would it not have done it just the themes justice, and some poems, I couldn't have written in isiZulu. Um, but I hope that people will the literary intelligentsia don't try and separate the Zulu from the English, because it's a body of work. If I wanted to have just the Zulu poems, I would have had a small chapbook, and the English poems would have had another small chapbook. It all works together. And yeah, so I hope that answers your question. I waffled on a little bit there, but
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks.
all right. Thank you so much.
Okay. I think with that, it doesn't seem like we have any more raised hands, but speak now, forever hold one's peace. But I mean, go ahead, please. We don't bite. I think there is a message. Oh no. I think it's Pralini saying that they all work together. If we do not have any more questions, I would love to just take this opportunity to thank Sihle once again for
Thank you so
sharing
much.
these beautiful, new, but also in a way very ancient feeling poems. In the
Oh,
way that sometimes it feels like you're channeling the voice of the river, and it's a beautiful, timeless, fluid journey through language and time, and war and loss and hope. Um, and I'd love to invite anyone who would like to stick with us just to take a little break. I think a little 5-minute break would be cool, for you to just stretch, grab some tea, and we'll come back and do our open mic
sorry,
section.
one last thing. I'm sorry
Of
to
course, yeah,
interrupt you.
please. Please.
There's a link to buy a copy. I'll sign it for you and I'll post it for you. I think there's a link in there. I forgot to say that in the beginning.
Yes. Yeah, of course. And
Yeah.
also that's my fault too. I should have also paid. Thank you so much for also just reminding me. But there's a link at the top of the chat to like a docs form, and you can just
Yeah.
fill out your details. And it's just been really fantastic. So yeah,
Thank you so much.
we'll keep it up in the chat, and for open mic we'll stop recording, but go ahead, stretch your legs, and then I'll see you back here in 5 minutes and you can share some poems. Amazing. Thank you. See you
Thank
soon.
you.